If you're in doubt about angels being real, I can arrange to change any doubts you feel. Wait till you see my Gidget. You want her for your Valentine. You're gonna say she's all that you adore, but stay away. Gidget is spoken for, you're gonna find that Gidget is mine.
Well, hello, world. Welcome to Comic Book News. I'm your old pal, Dan Shaheen. Today, we got a really interesting guest. We're going to talk to Gary Calabuono. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I forgot to ask him if I'm pronouncing it. Gary, nod if I'm pronounced that right. Okay, I did. Okay, sitting backstage, we got Gary Moondog Calabuono from Moondog Buys Comics. That says it all, right? This guy buys comics. If you've got a collection that you want to sell, and you want to enter into this crazy, frothy comic book back issue market of 2021, you might need a Sherpa to guide you on that path, right? To enlightenment. You might need a Moondog. But why do I trust this guy as opposed to, I know a guy at the local Joe's Comic Shack, and he said he'll buy all my books for a nickel a piece, no questions asked. Well, I'm not saying you can't trust that guy, but maybe you want to get a second opinion. Maybe you want to talk to a guy like Gary, who's got decades of experience selling comics. This guy has got experience. He built a successful chain of comic book stores and sold it. Moondog's Comics, 6 stores, I think it sold it. That in itself, if that's all he did, I'm talking to this guy. I want to talk to this guy. But he had a radio show in the 80s or early 90s, I think. I don't have my notes in front of me. Yeah, about comics. I'm a broadcasting major, San Francisco State, proud. I had a radio show about comics in another college radio station a few years ago. And now here I am on YouTube. So I just feel like this is a match made in heaven. We're going to bring in Gary. We're going to talk about comics, about what it takes to buy and sell comics in this market. And maybe I'll even try and get a little free advice from him. And I'll pull up a couple of Silver Age beauties in the $1 Million Comics Cam, and maybe he can give me some advice on what I do next. Thank you for watching this thing, right? Without you, it's not possible. I really appreciate it. If you haven't already, consider clicking subscribe. There's a little button down there. Just click on that thing. You're more likely to get recommended videos from me. The algorithmic gods will take mercy on me and show my wares to the watching public. I would really appreciate that. If you want to go even further, you can click that join button, see the multiple levels of support you can do to support this channel. I promise to take every penny of income from this channel and spend it on comic books. I promise, no matter what my wife says. Okay, so without further ado, next week, I've got an exciting guest booked and ready to go. Next week, Pat Mills. Do you know who Patrick Mills is? Patrick Mills is one of the creators of 2000 AD. He's one of the early Judge Dredd writers and the co-creator of this dude, Martial Law. He's got a new book that he called Space Warp. He calls it the creator-owned version of 2000 AD, and that sounds very exciting. He sent me an over 70-page PDF that I'm reading, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. But for now, it's time to bring in, we've got a few comments out there. Got a few people out in the audience. Daniel Moeller, good time, long time watcher, fan of the show, and creator of comics. We've reviewed Daniel's comics here before. Also, another Dan friend of the show, Dan Fragaboom, Moondog. Thank you, and Larry Marta for the kindness in 1993. Great shop and hospitality. Dan, stick around. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. We're not going to go much longer than an hour or so. So hang out and let's make it happen. Okay, now, without further ado, let me bring in the man himself, Gary Moondog Calabuono. Hey, Gary.
Hello, Dan. How are you? And I got to tell you, Pat Mills was at the Moondog store when they did the Fear and Loathing tour across the country. Pat and the artist, I'm just
Kevin O'Neill.
Kevin O'Neill. They were there, and of course Dan Fraga with all the Extreme Boys and everybody back in the day, and the Image Boys. It was it's so nice to reconnect with so many people. And that's what Moondog Buys Comics has done for me. You know, it was kind of like the whole idea is I have this long legacy of being in the comics business in so many levels. I mean, you know, Chicago Comic-Con CEO. I was the guy who standardized all the comic bag sizes. I mean, of all that thing, you know, 800 million comic covers I sold. Bought the Windy City convention comics collection. But so many levels, and I touched so many people, and over the years, you kind of fade away, but you know what? Those relationships are important, and I want to keep them going. And that's kind of what I've done here with Moondog Buys Comics. There's so many old customers, so many old employees, industry contacts who have, they're downsizing and they want to sell their collection. And now with the market exploding, and it's so complex and so complicated. What's the best way? What's the best way to maximize the return on your investment? And that's really what I'm doing with Moondog Buys Comics.
Great. We'll come back to that website. But first, I want to talk about this path, this trail that you blazed, man. When did you open your first comic book store?
Downtown Mount Prospect, Illinois, 1978. It was September 16th. And we, I had been going into the city. My old mentor, my old friend, Joe Sarno, who was the original Chicago Comic-Con actually was the originator of that show. I used to go down to his store and drive all the way from the northwest suburbs, all the way to Joe's shop. And then, I said one day, Joe, I said, why don't you live in Des Plaines, which is a northwest suburb right next to where I live. Why don't you open a store in the suburbs? You'll get all the guys like me to come to your store. And he goes, well, Gary, I don't need to do that. Why don't you do that? And so, I said, gee whiz, maybe I will. I don't know. I had been selling at swap meets and, small conventions in the Midwest. And I had a little mail order business going. And so when the right opportunity came, I opened that little tiny shop, 250 square feet for $125 a month.
Whoa. So who was your model though? Who did you have? What did you look to when you go, I want to make a brick and mortar comic store in 1978? Well, who did you have to?
There wasn't anyone. I mean, all you did was you said, okay, I'm setting up at a table. They didn't even call them booths back then. You got a table and you threw some boxes of comics on it. Maybe you get a backboard and put some board books behind you. And I just took that kind of idea and said, I'm just going to put it in this small shop. And in fact, I didn't even want to carry new comics because, the new comics, they were 30 cents at the time. And I'm going, how can I something for 30 cents? But I had a friend of mine who was a distributor back in the days who was associated with Capital City Distribution. and he convinced me to bring the new comics. And of course, that was the whole thing. I mean, once you had new comics, you had a reason for your customers to come in every week.
Yes.
And and so that was the thing that really spurred on my growth, was the fact that everyone wanted to buy new comics, and they had to go to 5 different 7-Elevens and convenience stores or whatever to find all the books. So now they had them all, and they had them early and at Moondogs, and it just exploded. I mean, I had a second store. I moved the first store to a bigger location within a year and a half, opened the second store, and then a third and a fourth. And then, of course, I wanted to get into the city, because that's really where all the real action is in Chicago, in my opinion. And when Tower Records announced they were opening their first Chicago location in 1992 in Lincoln Park, little expensive area, but I opened up right next to them. So if you walked into Tower, you walked right into Moondogs.
Wow.
And
so what was expensive there then? What are we talking about?
The real estate. The real estate was it was crazy. I mean, we had 1,000 square feet, and then at the time, it's 1992. So what are you looking at? 30 years ago, and we were paying $4,000 a month in rent and taxes and stuff for 1,000 square feet at that time. I mean, it was
which is a lot for today.
Well, it was real pricey then, you could imagine. But the volume of business we did was phenomenal, because we were in the right place. The whole idea about Moondogs was not so much back issues. It wasn't so much just comics. It was the pop culture experience that we were selling on our radio show, Moondog's Pop Culture Radio Hour. And, we had TV, movies, comics, all the stuff that you wanted. But I wanted to.
How did that happen? That's talk about ahead of your time, Gary. You're opening comic shops, and then you're broadcasting about comics, and you're tying those things in together to drive this business. I'm assuming, because, I mean, 6 shops, great. Okay, you're making money selling 30-cent comics, but I'm assuming a big part of the strategy was have places to also buy comics, right? Places where people could bring them.
Of course, but when you look at the fact that the merchandise that we were selling, a mom with a stroller who's buying stuff for her family, be it toys, be it games, be it clothing. I mean, whatever it is, that mom is going into a mall. She's comfortable there. She's not going to the typical comic book shop down the stairs, around the corner, in the basement. She's only going to buy where she's comfortable. And that's why I wanted to bring this concept, because I wanted to sell 10,000 Simpsons t-shirts as well as 10,000 X-Men. I mean, that was the whole goal. So the radio show was basically trying to get people to understand that Moondogs was more than just comics, that it was this really pop culture experience.
Okay, so how did you get you don't just launch a radio? I mean, some people do. In this day and age, you can just launch a TV station, right? But how do you do it? How do you do that then?
We were lucky. There was this 5,000 watt suburban station. All right. It's probably, you got all of Chicago, you got the Northwest, maybe as far as Rockford, Illinois. Okay. That's 60 miles away. And I convinced the manager. AM. Yeah. No, excuse me. 92.7 FM.
Oh, FM.
And it was a WCBR, which stood for Chicago Bears Radio, because they wanted to grab onto the Bears, right? I mean, that was their shtick. Well, we turned CBR into comic book radio, of course, and but what we wanted to do is establish a show that we could then go to the program directors around the country and all the big markets and say, look what's happening in Chicago. You should have us on. And, we had a sales team that went around to all the big markets pushing this show. But honest to God, it was like every single program director said, comic books, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
And now, of course, today, they'd say, well, you want to do live live radio with comics when the whole internet's full of comic stuff, maybe it'd be a different story. But back then, we were so far ahead of the curve. We had all the arrows in our back. I mean,
Sure.
and it just got to the point where it was an expensive endeavor. And, after a year, and my last ditch attempt was, instead of calling it Moondog's Pop Culture Radio Hour, we shortened everything to a half hour instead of 1 hour. And we just called it Pop Culture Radio.
Yeah.
And we got a little traction, but then, once they raised, people are going to raise the price on you at some point, and I just couldn't make it work. I just didn't have enough revenue coming in to
Right.
buy it.
Oh man, I know that feeling, buddy. Let me tell you, but we've got different revenue streams to pursue here. And I'm going to say though, I don't think like a show about like general pop culture is going to make much of an impact on the internet today, necessarily, unless it's, really great. But the thing that we could use is your in-depth knowledge on like grading, spotting, understanding how to sell comics, what makes a comic worth something, what makes it not. And more importantly, the thing that I find when I had a store that I found most people did not understand was your time is worth money, right? Like, sure, yes, you could get more if you sell this yourself on eBay. I guarantee you will get more if you sell them. I also guarantee you're going to spend a lot more time. So if your time isn't worth nothing, then it might make sense for you to do that. Otherwise, I got an offer for you, pal. Right?
The cost of sales, the cost of selling comics, whether you are selling them yourself, or you're hiring me to sell them for you, or you're selling your collection to me, I'm going to have to sell your comics. And the cost of sales is the same for you, for me, for anyone. You've got all of the auction fees, and then you have all the shipping and all the handling that goes into it. I've done enough research. Figure 20% of the selling price is what it costs to sell your books. 20%, 10% auction fee, basic, and then another 10%. So after that, what is a legitimate profit a dealer should make? So let's say you have $1,000 comic book. It's going to cost $200 to sell that book. At the end of the day, you're going to net $800. Now, from that $800, okay, what if you sold it to me? I'm going to net $800 after I sell it. So what profit is legitimate for that, for me to make a profit on that book? Is $200 profit on $1,000 sale? Is that legitimate? Could be. Is $400? Because comics are such a illiquid investment, you've got to have, you're not going to get the same return. You're not going to get the same price that you would if you had a gold Krugerrand and you decided that you're going to walk into a coin store and you're going to get the spot price of gold immediately on the spot. It just
fungibility, right? We're talking about fungibility is what we're
there you go. It's there. We all look at all these incredible sales of back issue comics, and we look at them and just marvel at how the prices are increasing, and like it's people are printing money. If the real winners in all of this, are the buy and hold collectors who have been steadfast in over the years. The guys who paid $150 for their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle #1 3 or 4 years after it came out, that guy, the buy and hold guy, is the guy who's making out the best. He's the backbone, because when it comes time to sell, he's going to take all of his love for his books, all of the time that he's invested in keeping them, he's going to benefit from this. Rather,
he curated, right? He curated his own collection.
Absolutely, as opposed to the speculator. Like I sold a copy of Incredible Hulk 181, 7.0 with white to off-white pages on Comic Link last night. $7,000, $7,005.
Oh my goodness.
Now that same book a year ago is half the price. It's a 7.0. It's not.
So what's going on? So what's going on, Gary?
Well, this is the whole point. These are not collectors in the traditional sense who are buying these books, Dan. This is the thing that people need to understand. Somebody that's paying, go to Michael Jordan cards, go to LeBron James cards, LeBron James $5 million card. That's not a collector who bought that. That's a guy who is also buying AMC and GameStop stock, GameStop stock. It's guys that are buying NFTs. They're tech entrepreneurs. They're people with so much money that and one of their friends said, hey, you know what? We can make some money doing this stuff. And so they're all part of a network that will leave this hobby faster than rats on a sinking ship if things don't go, continue to go well. And it's going to be really ugly. It's going to be really ugly for some people, but they're not the collectors. So the collector is the guy who still, if he just holds fast, is going to be just fine in the long run. His books may not be worth what they are today. For instance, you have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 in 9.8. I had one 4 years ago, sold it for a record price, $33,000. That same book today is $150. $150. Now you want to sell that book for $150 right now? I might be inclined if I had one. But it's not going to be $300 in 2 years. I mean, it could be, but it's probably going to be,
Well, they ain't making more of them, Gary.
They're not making any more, but people who are buying them are not the collector. Yeah. See, that's just it, And people who aren't collectors, they're just they're speculators. They get in, they get out, and then they move on to something else.
Yeah. Although what I've heard, I've heard that a lot of institutional investors have started moving things in, paintings, for instance, have always been what the rich put their money into, right? Because you could hide your money in a painting, essentially. You can hide it from taxes. There's a lot. And I think that people started realizing the same, well, I can't afford a Rembrandt or a Mona Lisa, but I can get a Hulk 181, right? I can get something.
Yes, but again, that's not a comic book collector. That's a guy,
True.
Right? This is the whole point. The people who are paying these prices didn't pass up. It's like, okay, I'm going to finally buy that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #1 for $150,000. He didn't buy it at $300. He didn't buy it at $1,000. He didn't buy it at $5,000. He didn't buy it at $10,000. He's not going to pay $150. Because he's had the opportunity to buy it at such a lower price. So it's not.
I mean, could this though be what's moving? It's moving the collectible part of the hobby into just the unreachable stratosphere, where it already. I mean, we saw this happen with original comics artwork already, right? Mm-hmm. Like that happened more than a decade ago, I'd say, maybe 2. Mm-hmm. So are we not just seeing that with keys, with rare keys?
Well, you use the word rare. Tell me how rare Hulk 181 is. I think there's 15,000 of them that have been slammed or something. I mean, it's not.
But the fungibility, the grading, right? That's the part of it that really adds a wrinkle to the whole thing. It's like you said, it's not a Krugerrand. I can't it's not one copy of Hulk 181 is not worth the same as another copy, right?
No. Well, they technically, if they have the same third-party grade. Let's use 9.8. See, the third-party grading, the certification allows this to happen because you have so-called third party who's uninterested in the value of it, just attesting to the grade of it. Okay.
Supposedly uninterested in the value, right?
Oh well, there's so many. See, this is where the poor collector or the family of the collector who passes away.
Yes.
This is what happens. That's the shame, because they you know, they walk into their local comic book store and said, my husband passed away, and he left all these comics. What do I do? Well, that guy, he might say, I'll be happy to buy them, and he pays $1,000 for $100,000 worth of stuff. I'm not saying that guy is a crook. That's what he does. That's his business.
Right.
Okay? And but if you've bought or inherited or you have this collection, and you want to sell it, what do? Well, you need to go to somebody who's going to outline the complexities of this marketplace. Now, if you just have a normal VG collection of Bronze Age comics, which is really a common occurrence, it's okay. You might have a couple of, a Spider-Man 121, 122, and there, even a 129, in VG, and they're $1,000 or so. But you want to make sure that you can maximize and understand what you have so you can make an informed decision. And this is where the whole system of it's not rigged, okay, because that's a negative term, but it's established, it's evolved into where the insiders can take advantage of uninformed buyers and sellers. I mean, that's just the way it is, and it's like that in every hobby, every from art to anything. The uninformed can get hurt.
Yeah, that's classic, right? Though that knowledge, you spend your time retaining that knowledge, and you talked about profit margins that are acceptable for a dealer. Back in the day, I remember you go to a comic shop, they're like, "I'll pay you about half of what I'll sell it for."
Sure.
Right?
Why? Because it makes sense. If you look at that, Dan, and thanks for bringing me back around to that. If the cost of sales is 20% for, I buy $1,000 comic, how much is a legitimate profit? Well,
yes.
You look at it and say, okay, if I pay a half, I'm going to make $300 profit at the end of the day on this deal. A 30% profit, net profit margin. That's Apple. That's Google. I mean, that's what, it makes some sense. The idea that a dealer, is going to pay 85% of the retail for something is just it's not going to happen.
It's not realistic.
The only way, right? It's not realistic. But what he tells you, someone, I'm going to pay 85% for your collection, but of course he's downgrading it the entire time in order to still, at the end of the day, make a half.
Okay.
Everything kind of evolved. The idea of paying a third to a half is really, it evolved over the years because it makes sense for dealers. Well,
yeah. So talk about that for just a second. So if I want to talk about selling a single issue versus a collection, right? And that is a whole different animal. I would have people come in and they'd bring in their long boxes, and I would look through there and I'd see one or two comics and I'm like, yeah, I'll pay.
Sure.
I know I can sell that. I'll pay 50%. I'll maybe even pay a little bit more than that because I think it's a good issue. But then the vast majority, I will never sell.
Yeah, especially if you have a buyer. You can go ahead and say, hey, I'm going to take care of this good customer. I'm going to buy this book from this person right now and hold it for him. Next time he comes in, he's going to be the happiest guy in the world.
But what do you do with the rest of those books? Well, this is where there's different retailers have different strategies with this. And what's yours?
The old Moondog legend, if you will, was always that all comics have value, but not all comics are valuable. So, you go through that long box and you pick out the one or two valuable comics. Now, what do you got? Well, you have books that might be in a $3 for $1 box. They could be in a $1 box. They could be in $3 for $5 box. They could be in a $5 box. Okay, I mean they're all in there. But people, dealers,
just the time to figure that out, though.
Right. They don't want to have to go through that. And that's where the collector or the family has to understand that, hey, these books have value, but they're not valuable. So you can, whatever you can get for them is legitimate. If a dealer says, I only paid 50 cents a piece, then that's okay, for that guy.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm a seller, I want to get a second opinion on anything that is of value, or I want to do a minimum, the minimum amount of research necessary,
Yes.
so that I don't, with the internet, spend
so easy now, right?
Absolutely, there's no question.
But at the same time, it's not. Right? Like people will go to the internet and they'll go, look, dude, I see this on eBay for $30,000, but nobody's bought it for that. Like people will put insanity on eBay or Amazon or other places, and without any bearing in reality.
Well, that again, then you try to explain to them using advanced search and just the sold sales, etc., so they can actually see what something's selling for. But actually, in this day and age, it's easier to buy than it is to sell. It's easier to buy comics, a dealer to buy comics, than it is for the seller to feel they're getting a fair shake. That's the thing, because it's so complex. It's so, the idea of a 9.8. When I was part of the Rating Standards Committee thing, when we all got together with Bob Overstreet in 1999, and we're all together and we're trying to figure things out, I'm going, let's have near mint at 9.0, near mint to mint at 9.5, and then mint at 10. And maybe there was 50, 60 people in the room. There were probably 50 of us that thought that made sense. But the 10 people who said no were the ones who ended up, their point of view won over. And that was, they needed to make it as complicated as possible so somebody couldn't figure out what they had. So that's why you have 9, 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8, 9.9 and 10. My God, it's impossible for anybody to look at a comic book and say, is it 9.6, 9.8, or 9.4? You can't do it.
Well, so let's briefly talk about that then. We won't name them per se, but let's talk about the third-party grading services. There's really one that matters. So I've never sent anything in to be slabbed. I was not a slab guy. I'm a grade it, price it, and move it guy. So, and I didn't have the kind of books that I felt merited it. So you send something to those guys. Is it true that what they're going to charge you to grade it is a function of the market value of the comic that is being graded?
It can be if it's expensive enough.
So how is that not a conflict of interest in and of itself? How is there not just an objective standard of what a condition is on a comic, regardless of the aftermarket value or whatever?
Well, I guess it all comes down to how things evolve. When CGC first started, they wanted to make sure, I didn't want to name them, but I just named them. But the point is that, they knew that.
Oh, Gary, you're going to get us in trouble, dude. That's okay.
They hoped. I'm not saying anything bad here.
Bad boy, Gary. Bad boy. Please. No.
I love CGC. If it weren't for them, I'd be out of business. Okay.
Okay. Fair enough.
But their pricing structure is based on the value that they bring to the transaction. So if they, you got to remember that they survive not on the high end comics. If you have an Amazing Fantasy in 7.0 and it's 125,000. Okay, they're going to charge you 2%. So what's that? $500, $200, whatever it is. They're going to charge you a price that is reasonable in their opinion. Okay, but their bread and butter is certifying modern era comics, because they can do them 10 times faster. As opposed to all the time necessary to take a journey into Mystery 83. Count every page, make sure that looking at the staples, checking for especially value stamps, restoration, especially all this modern era stuff. You get a case, somebody sends them a case of Wolverine #1s from 1982, and there's still cases of those out there, and they zip right through them. I mean, and that's how they really make their money on the modern era stuff. So.
And I mean that alone, just the effort of doing that and the time it takes and the money it takes adds value right away to the book and increases its fungibility and thus its saleability, I guess.
People ask me all the time, should I get my book slabbed? And the answer is only slab your books if you're going to sell them. There's no reason in the world to slab that book unless you're going to sell it, because you can even protect it better than that slab can.
Yes,
by putting it into a polyester mylar sleeve with an acid-free board and keeping it in a cool, dark, dry place. I mean, you don't need a plastic holder from any of the grading companies to do that.
Do you know Charles Abar?
Do I know Charles Abar? I knew of Charles Abar. He was my competitor. Come on.
Yes,
Charles,
and he's a good friend of mine to this day.
Charles Abar sold almost as many comic bags as I did. I think, I'm a big Fun Yet fan. Fun Yet Serious polybags. I got to tell you, Charles had a great product. So did Steve Johnson. Steve Johnson had a great product. But, what I had, though, is I had the only brand. I mean, comic covers, I sold all those trademarks. I had comic covers, comic cards, our backing boards, comic cartons was our box. And, of course, that was the umbrella, was the comic care system. Nice. And sold that all to Diamond in 1996. So Diamond owns all those trademarks. But Capital carried all my stuff. Diamond carried all my stuff. And because of that, my, the comic 800 million of anything is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of something. I don't know, but there's a lot of, there's nothing that's cooler is when I buy a collection and I look and there's a package of comic covers on there and it'll say, copyright 1989 Moondogs Inc. I mean,
that's awesome.
It is awesome. It's cool. It's cool. Or seeing a price sticker on one of my comics. That's cool.
All right, Moondog, I want to do something if you don't mind. I don't even care if you do mind. It's my show, so I'm going to do it. I want to get some free advice from the man. Do you mind looking at some comics with me?
Let's look at them.
Okay. Do you know how we look at comics on this show?
I only watched the last one I watched was Rosansky, and it was just so great. What a great interview. God, what a man.
Thank you. That guy, he gets the credit for that for sure. I just emailed him today. I want to try and do another one with him maybe soon.
He's fan. And then you had the one with Hanley and Rory talking about Rory, and you had Jim and all those boys. Jim Hanley, Leibowitz, Shelton Drum, Buddy Saunders, Brian Shore, Len Peterson, Gursky. I mean, all these guys were part of the DLG, the direct line. Joe took over after I left, and turned into Comic Pro. I mean, all these big retailers, we all got together to look out for each other. Distributors are screwing everybody. So,
we can talk about that too in a second. First, wait a minute. First, let's go to where we go when we look at comics. Here, we go into something we like to call the $1 Million Comics. All right, here we go. $1 Million Make You Holler Comics Cam. Let me get it into maybe this mode. Yeah. Okay. I got some Green Lanterns to look at today, Gary.
Nice copy right on the top there.
This is my favorite cover for sure of the ones that I've got.
Gil Kane, beautiful work.
Awesome stuff.
Is that 23 or 24? I guess in the showcase.
This one is 56.
Mm-hmm.
This is 18. This is 24.
It is 24. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Which is, I believe, the third Silver Age appearance. At least that's what it says on here. This is old prices that were on this. I bought this I bought all 4 of
Is
these.
this from the Dan Shaheen collection? Is that what
Well,
we're looking at here?
yeah,
Wow.
we are. I bought these recently from a neighbor and who was selling for another neighbor. And I did my best to research them and figure out what I thought the price would go for. And I made an offer of of a little over half that. Just because, I don't know, because they didn't want them. They didn't quite appreciate what they had going on there, and they thought maybe I would. So when somebody brings a stack of books like this to you, what's the first thing you do?
The first thing I do is I look and I go, oh, God, look how beautiful these books were. Look at these, incredible covers, with primary colors, and they were created to jump off of a rack and into the hearts of teenage boys, and and it was just as opposed to today's everything is black and brown and gray. The new comic rack is so ugly today. It's just a shame. It's just
there's some exceptions to that, but for the
I'm
most
not saying
part,
the
I
art
agree.
itself is bad. I'm not saying the art is bad. I'm saying the comic rack. When you look, just blur your eyes and look at a comic rack. It's just brown and gray and black. I mean,
I agree. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's actually the more modern printing techniques.
Absolutely.
Like in the old days, they had to work within these limitations and had to be really amazing designers.
100% correct. 100% correct. Now that Green Lantern 56, is that what that is?
This is 56, yeah. Yeah,
pages look white, and the cover, I don't see any stress marks. On
there, it's hard to tell on the MDCC. There are some. There's a few.
Couple of small ones there. Yeah, I can't see them.
Yeah, it's hard to tell in this view. Let me see if I can.
But those black covers are tough to. They're tough to get without a lot of stress marks.
See, there's a few. It's hard to see.
Okay, but it's still a nice. It looks to be, a very, find a very fine copy.
Oh yeah, I said a minimum VG plus fine minus. I thought for sure, but I don't know. I tend to be conservative in my grading because I used to have a problem with overgrading.
Especially if you're buying, you have to be conservative when you're buying. The worst thing you can do is buy something with rose-colored glasses on it, and then you realize that you just paid the 9.0 price for a 7.0 book. There's nothing worse from a dealer standpoint than that.
Yeah. And, that's typical if you go into a shop that's not a comic shop, like you go into a thrift store or something, they grab the price guide and they look to the right column and they put that price on the comic, even though it's falling apart.
Yeah, this one looks a little rougher.
This one's got the major crease here. That's hard to see here. Major crease.
Yeah, it's rougher, but but see, the real problem that you have here is that nobody cares about these. The Showcase 24 is different, but nobody cares about Green Lantern right now. What I mean by that is nobody's caring about Silver Age DCs that are not investment high grade books. That's 9.4 and higher. Nobody cares about them, and so they languish, or they sell.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them on the, especially on the market right now. Forget about the fact that there are a lot of collections. There's a lot on the market, and they're not moving at any kind of the price that you would think they should. See, that's the key, man. These books are classics. I mean, and they should be doing better than they are, but they're not because of all of this speculation that's going on. But now that Showcase though. That third Green Lantern, that's a great book. That's a great book.
That's a 10 center. I love any cover with dialogue on the cover. That's such a dated DC thing. I love it.
But that's any of the Showcase Green Lanterns. I mean, it predates #1. I mean, how beautiful is that?
So I mean, if somebody brought this stuff to you, you don't need to give me an offer per se. This is stuff you would buy.
I'd buy the Showcase.
And that's it, huh?
Yeah. I don't have buyers for the other books.
Yeah.
I mean, what am I going to do? I'm going to stick them in a pile and the pile gets bigger and bigger. And then I end up wholesaling them to another dealer. You know,
Now, do you see that as a buying opportunity, though, in any way that the cycle may come around? All it would take would be a good Green Lantern, like mass media project, movie, TV show, or something, and the value could spike.
I don't know. Well, if these were like file copies, maybe, you know,
Yeah.
then you'd have something. But it's just so hard to sell average, you know, non-key, average books in average condition, Silver Age books for any kind of price. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that my local comic store that I go to, Comics Revolution, downtown Mount Prospect. Jim Mortenson's old
friend of the show, Jim Mortensen.
Right, Jim Mortensen, absolutely. Hired Jim he was the Moondog's marketing director out of Northwestern in 1995, 94. I hired Jim, and you
hired some anarchist punk off the street.
I did, and I'll tell you, when we debuted Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics at Northwestern, because Jim Mortensen and his buddy Heath Rowe ran the comic book club at Northwestern, and we debuted Scott's book at, you know, the #1 university in the Midwest. And it was one of those moments that we will always remember at Moondogs. It was fantastic.
Okay, Gary, can I tell you what I paid for this stack of 4, and you tell me, just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the deal?
Okay.
I paid a crisp $100 bill.
Here's that thumbs up.
Awesome. Okay, that's all I need to hear, because I heard it from the man. I heard it from Gary.
I would buy those for $100, but I would, you know, get my money back on the other 3, and then just make my cash on the showcase.
I researched it, and like you said, the showcase was the one, but they totaled up in the conditions that I saw this in. Retail, I found them. I could buy them right this second online for about $200.
Mm-hmm.
In basically the same condition. So, okay. I don't feel like a dummy. And my neighbor, if you're watching, which you're not, I'm not ripping you off. People of Arcata, bring your comics to Dan.
Now you're talking.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. What else did I have on my list? I just wanted to show you these. I don't know, because I bought them and I don't know what I'm going to do with them. But like you, I could not pass it up. I'm like, would I rather have this 100 paper with Benjamin Franklin on it, or would I rather have this stack of paper?
Or would you? There's no. Or would, if you had a chance to buy a 9.0, a 9.0 New Mutants 98. You know, I mean, you know, with first Deadpool. I mean, you know, you're gonna. It's worth a couple hundred, and so you pay $100 for it. Or what would you rather have? I mean, look at that showcase, man. I mean,
I bought that New Mutants for 75 cents.
I was 9 years old when that book came out, and it is so great. It is so effing great.
I love hearing your passion about comics, and that's one of the reasons why I did this. This is Gary here, but this is not the original picture that was behind you. I can't really, you can take a look, but tell me who that is behind you. And why do you have a life-size picture of yourself?
I have a lifetime picture because you're a Photoshop master. That picture, though, is from a high school newspaper. I was a sophomore in high school, and they were doing an article on, you know, weird sophomore with strange hobby. Okay. And I'm reading my first Golden Age comic I ever owned. I got it from my dad in a stack of stuff that he had. And so when they took my picture for the article, I had to use that book because it was my first Golden Age book.
Here it is.
Yeah. And then that one with my brothers with the fish, I think you had it just, you know, that's the first comic I ever bought. Action 245. And
that's amazing.
Look at, there's my brother with a fish, and my younger brother is so happy. And what am I doing? We're on vacation, and I'm just showing off my first comic book.
Sweet. Because 1958. Goodness gracious, Gary. So wait a minute, we got your timeline right here. Let's take a look at it while we're in here.
There you
go. 1967, you started your mail order comic book company.
I used to, you know, make sure I wrote to everybody who had an address in Marvel Comics who looked like they would be a collector. and because I had a lot of doubles, and I was selling books for $0.25 and 50 cents. So.
All right. Then in 1976, you sold at the Comic-Con. We talked about that, and then soon after opened Moondogs.
Right.
Okay. How do you get named an Overstreet Price Guide advisor? Is it just you got to buy enough table space somewhere and then you get in?
No, I knew Bob, and we were having lunch at Chicago Comic-Con, and I used to send him a list of books every year that I sold, and he said, "How'd you like to be an advisor?" And I said, "God, are you kidding me? I mean, what prestige that would be? I'd love to be an advisor."
Yeah.
And so I became one, and because he asked me. Isn't that nice? Yeah.
Well, how do you feel like ethically? How does it work? Like, how does it work that, like, is there not explain why there's not a conflict of interest between dealers setting a price guide of stuff that they're selling?
Well,
like
a price guide needs data. I mean, they just need data, and what are things selling for? And because I was a large enough dealer and had enough information that had some value to Bob, he asked me to be an advisor. I mean, I don't see the conflict. I mean, dealers are price guide advisors in every field. So.
Absolutely. No, I mean, there's no other way it could work, but it's just, it just seems weird. But it was explained to me that these are not speculative prices in any way. You guys are sort of ethically bound to report prices you have actually sold books.
Exactly. We're not hoping that this is the price we'll get next time. We're just telling Bob what we received. Now, it used to be really pretty exclusive to be an advisor back in 1984. I mean, Bob opened it up in the 90s, and now when you go to the back of the guide, there's like 4 pages of guides.
Right. Okay, well, you purchased the legendary Windy City collection in 1986. Some have called 1986 the best year for comics in the modern era for all the great comics that came out.
Yeah, I can't argue that. Tons of great stuff. But, the Windy City collection was 2,500 Golden Age through Avengers 1. There was an Avengers 1 in the collection. All first issues, all never read, all high grade.
Amazing.
And the Marvel #1 that sold for $1.26 million 2 years ago was the Windy City copy.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah. Kind of cool. I owned a book that at one point that was sold for $1 million. I mean, I had I bought the book for $12,000 and sold it 2 years later for $22,000. But and then I reinvested the profits in my business. I mean, it was just inventory. It wasn't in my collection or anything. Now, that's one book though I should have kept.
What is in Gary's collection? Like, what's the book of books for you? What's the thing that just tickles your fancy?
Well, my collection now consists of just 4 comics. I only have 4 comics left. I sold 2 of them. I had 6 comics, but last month, earlier this month, I sold the Action Comics ash can of the Action Comics ash can, and then the Action Funnies ash can through Heritage. It was the cover of the Platinum catalog. And that was my book, and I kept that book. I bought it from Saul Harrison in 1986, and it was one of those moments that you'll never forget when you have a chance to buy something that you don't know what it is because it's so rare that you've never.
I thought you had a picture of it here. I want to show them what we're talking about.
There's a picture someplace on the website.
I'll keep looking.
But if you jumped over to Heritage too, you can probably see it. But
either way, it was like an amazing ash can edition of like Action Comics, but they wanted to call it Action Funnies. Is that right?
I sold 2 of them: the Action Comics and the Action Funnies.
Yes.
See, when they were not sure if what they were going to call Action Comics, Harry Donenfeld said, make me ash cans. And the reason they made ash cans was to secure the trademark for the title, the title and the logo. So, they didn't want another publisher stealing or coming to publishing a book before they could get theirs out. So in 1938, it was like, okay, I got this title, Action Comics. What a great title. Bob Overstreet said it's the greatest title in the history of comic book titles. And I can't argue with that.
I could argue it's More Fun is the greatest name.
So Harry Donenfeld goes, I want ash cans made of Action Comics, Action Funnies, triple action, double action, and triple action.
Ah, okay.
And so what they did is they made a dummy comic. Okay, they took some remaindered pages, of previously printed books and put a new cover on them, and then on these pages, but then they had the logo that they created, and that logo was then sent with a trademark application to in those days, the U.S. Patent Office. Today, it's called the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Yes.
So they would send this fake comic book, if you will, because they didn't go to press with it. They made it in the offices, and that secured the trademark. So there's 3 Action Comics. There's one in the DC vault. There's one that I happened to sell 12 years ago for $50,000. And then there is the one that I just sold last month, and it sold for $200,000.
So then your itch is not so much out of nostalgia, it's more out like that is the rarest, coolest, craziest thing.
Exactly. See, and the 4 that I still own, Dan, I'm the only guy on the entire planet. Okay. I mean, of all the 6 billion people, only I own the Superman ash can, Superwoman, Superboy, and Supergirl. Okay, all 4 the super family, if you will. DC does not have a Supergirl or a Superboy in their vault. They have a Superwoman.
You are cut. You and Chuck Rosansky are cut from the same cloth, man. I love it.
I'll tell you, man. The idea of I can't sell these things, but I don't want to leave them and have my wife have to deal with selling afterwards. So it's that's why I kind of sold the 2 actions, because
right.
I think maybe it's time to make life simpler for my family.
Well, speaking of trademark, Gary, one thing DC failed to get a trademark on? They don't own a trademark on the term mother box. But I do.
Well, here's something that's really interesting when you delve into, and I'm like the Overstreet ash can advisor. I'm the expert. When you go there, you'll see Bob thanks me for taking care of all this little part of the hobby. But I know. But Fawcett wanted to call. They wanted to call their first Captain Marvel book Flash Comics. Okay, and so they made an ash can, Flash Comics, with Captain Marvel on it. Mm-hmm. But DC made an ash can of Flash Comics and got it there before Fawcett did. So DC beat them to Flash. So what did they call their comic instead of Flash? They called it Whiz. Flash and Whiz. I mean, so that's pretty cool. So Whiz Comics #1 is actually an ash can edition.
I thought it was one of those underground dirty sex comics, Whiz Comics. I wasn't sure about that. Yeah. Gary, you're almost out of time. Can you stick around? You have a little more time, or do you got to get going?
No, I'm all yours.
Okay. So I don't have too much more time, but I definitely wanted to look at what I wanted to take a look at. Back to your website again. So tell us one more time about. I got some comics. What do I do? Where do I go?
Go to moondogbuyscomics.com, and then the phone number on there 866 MD comic, and it's toll free. Call me, and I'll give you a free appraisal, and then give you all your options. It could be, hey, you've got a bunch of 1990s, comics and they're not worth anything, but they're great reading and they're great to give away at Halloween, that kind of stuff. Or it could be, you've got average condition Marvels and DC Silver Age books. You've got a couple of good keys in there. You can make some money on that, and I can buy them outright, or I can tell you, you might want to just go to your local comic store if you're not local to me. Go and if you can get $500 for that, that's a fair price. So I give people their options, and and I've been the agent for some major collections that have sold over the years, and if it's the right situation, I'll be your representative. Make sure you get the lowest price possible.
Awesome. All right, let's open it up to Q&A. We still got 13 people, 26 eyeballs, assuming everybody's got 2 of them. If you got any questions, now's the time. I'll keep chatting here with Gary. If you want to know, if you got any questions about grading comics or how it works or any of that stuff, Moondog's your man. Of course, you can also go to his website. And I recommend that you do, because just that kind of advice that you just said right there, like what would be a fair deal at my local comic shop? And from everything that you outlined, like you are thinking of it from a dealer's point of view. You've been there, you have that experience. You know that you've included that they're going to have a markup in what they sell it.
Another thing I suggest to people that have collections that are hard to sell, is use Craigslist. It's local and there's no fees, and you'll meet somebody in your garage and they'll look through your 3 or 4 long boxes and just use a description of comic book collection, give this the range of years, and then try look at it and say, okay, if I got $3 a piece, I'd be happy, and so you count them up, you got 1,000 books, $3,000 or best offer. Now you might get a guy comes in and says, I can't give you 3,000, but my offer is 2,000. Then it becomes a business decision for you. But I'll tell you, a lot of guys have had real good luck moving hard to sell collections on Craigslist.
Facebook Marketplace. I hear incredible things about sales on Facebook Marketplace.
I bought stuff myself from some local people. In fact, I sold a car too. On Facebook Marketplace. That's another good example. I like Craigslist though, because it's Facebook Marketplace is I'm not sure how far it goes, from one neighborhood to another, that kind of thing. Whereas Craigslist,
I think you can localize it, but
right. I mean, Craigslist in Chicago, you get all of Chicago. It's just, I found that to work out a little bit better.
I bought tons of stuff off of Craigslist, and although I see it moving over time, I see Craigslist sort of peaked for a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Selling and I see a lot of action moving to Facebook. Have you seen the Comic Book Shopping Network on Facebook? Okay, you should check out one of my interviews with them and Jesse James. So they have a 24-hour network hand selling comics on Facebook video. Okay.
Now I understand. I understand that you'll get a 1099 now from Facebook if you sell enough of those or something. I mean,
probably should.
I heard that there's because eBay's doing it, so I heard that Facebook is going to start doing it. Whereas Craigslist, you might fly under the radar a little bit too.
Right. But we would never recommend those kind of shenanigans, Gary Colabone. What are you, from Chicago or something? What's going on over here?
Hey now, watch it, Daddy.
Sorry. I don't want to disparage Chicago. I'm a fan for sure. I'm a fan of Gary Colabuono too, man. I really am. I feel like you did so many things at so many different angles, and I never have been to Chicago. It's one of the cities in the United States it's on my list to go to.
I mean, the Comic-Con now, I guess that they're opening today. They announced that you can have conventions again. So Wizard World, my partners and I sold the Chicago Comic-Con to Wizard in 1997. They asked me to come on board. I was a dealer at the first show in 1976, and then in 1991 they asked me to be a partner in the show, and we sold it in 1997 to Wizard. Back in the, I know you're a young guy, but you still remember Wizard.
How young? I'm not that young, pal. You know what? In 1986, I forgot to say, 1986 was a banner year for comics because it's the year Danny Shaheen got his first job at the comic book store.
Nice.
At age 11 for $2 an hour in store credit.
Store credit. There you go. I'll tell you, the greatest thing in the world for kids, 11 years old, was hanging out at the comic store and then getting to work for the owner for store credit. I mean,
amazing.
How great that was.
This is 1986. We're flying under the radar. There's no work permits. There's nothing. It was so fantastic. And the things going on in that store was great. I'm sorting baseball cards and it was just
we consider guys like you mascots. You were mascots, man.
What?
Get the mascot over here. Sweep up that back room. Get the mascot over here.
Well, this mascot grew up and bought that store.
Nice.
Okay, I bought the store that I worked in, and I ran it for 10 years, and it's still there now. Hijinks Comics in San Jose. Please check it out if you're in San Jose. Oldest comic book store in San Jose.
Sweet.
Gary, I got to get out of here. But anything you got to say before you go? One more plug. One more chance to plug the site.
I got this long legacy of stuff, and and because of all of my love for this and all the blessings that I have received over the years, if I can help somebody, not get taken on their when they're selling a collection, it makes it all worthwhile. It just makes it all worthwhile.
Awesome. And if you can make a little bit of scratch while you're doing that,
well, that's my job. I got partners. They want to, when they come to me and said, we want to do Moondog Buys Comics, I go, I'm retired. And they go, no, we'll take care of all the work. We'll just let you just be Moondog and we'll do all the work. So.
You ever watch the show Pawn Stars? Sorry to go left field right at the end here. You ever watch that show? Are they not the worst comic buyers of all time?
They're the worst buyers of everything. Okay. I mean, the only part of that show that I think makes any sense is when Rick will say, hey, there's no room in this for me, because that is real. That part of it is real. The rest of it is just bull.
Hey, Michael Strelitz paid £5 to say to the man, Daniel Fragaboom, where's my comic book? Just joking. Mom died 3 weeks ago. Get rested. Sorry to hear that, Michael. Dan Fraga, still watching, was talking about how, let's see, he's got a show coming up, The Professionals, tonight at 1 a.m. somebody's time. Go check out Danny's channel. He's got good stuff going on. Gary, I want to thank you. I got to do the closing credits and the cameo thing. Stick around if you got a chance, if you still got time to talk, or if not, I'll see you soon.
Well, I got this other one this baby boomers thing I'm doing. So thank you, Dan, so much for having me on. And, if anyone needs anything, go to moondogbuyscomics.com.
For sure. All right. Thank you, Moondog. Oh, and thank you, folks, for watching this show. This was fantastic. We had a lot of people watching. I thought Gary was amazing. I've got so much in common with this guy, broadcasting, comics, business. Like, that's a business mind. These are the guys that I like the most having on the show. The people that are a guy like Gary, just like Chuck Rosiansky, just like any of the friends of the show that have been, any of the multiple retailers, like Jim Mortensen or like Steve Jeppy, for that matter. These guys could have been successful in pretty much any business field that they wanted, because they've got that kind of smarts and business savvy. But what they have that separates them from others with that same savvy is this passion for comics and this love of comics. And those things are like, for certain people, they're like force multipliers, right, on top of each other. And so, like, in your business, builds your hobby, builds your passion, makes you money. What a virtuous cycle that is. I dream of having something like that that's fully comic book related someday. I think I got a chance. I'm learning lessons here from guys like Gary and others on the show. Anyway, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, man. Next week, next Thursday, I'm going to try to do more live streams. I'm going to coming back tomorrow at noon for another $1 million mailbox with Larry Young. We will look at some of the comics that people have been sending me and mailing to me. Speaking of which, if you've got comics you want to send to me, you know where to send them, to the $1 million mailbox, P.O. Box 1163, Arcata, California, 95518. Send them to me. They show up in the box. I take them, I put them in the comics cam. Everybody's happy with that scenario. So until next week, when we're going to talk to Pat Mills. Oh my gosh, who's written more incredible comic? I think Martial Law is one of the greatest. It's certainly the greatest like superhero parody comic of all time in my mind. It pulls no punches and it really calls out American superhero comics for what they were. Thinly veiled psychosexual power fantasies, and who doesn't love those? That's what this whole channel's all about. So thanks for watching. Tune in for Pat, tune in for $1 Million Mailbox, and tune in for a lot more impromptu live streams by yours truly, because I'm just having a lot of fun getting up in the morning, reading a comic book, and then coming in here and showing it to you and talking about it. It's been a lot of fun. You guys have been reacting really well to that. So thanks for hanging out, and we will see you when? Oh, you know when. Next time.